Tower of London in England, built in 1070 AD, nearly 1,000 years ago, by William the Conqueror. He built a mighty stone tower at the center of the London fortress, and now 1,000 years later, the tower still has the capacity to both fascinate and horrify, and that comes directly from historicalroyalpalaces.com. The tower also protects the crown jewels, is the home of the Yeoman Wanderers, which we'll see an image of one of those here directly, and also the legendary guardians, the ravens, the 6 ravens, which I'll get into more of that at the end of the tour. So right now, this tour is brought to us by youvisit.com. It's a little different from what we're used to seeing with our 360 tours. This is a single panoramic shot, and they have curved it to make it interactive to where we can still look up and down. Sorry. Let me mute her. It does lag a little bit. So she was just going to go into a little bit of the history that I just told you. Out here, you can see the fortress wall. So I'm not quite sure on the height, but I know it is one of the most that London Tower is an impenetrable fortress, and having never been it's never been invaded. So we have a few other images down here that I'd like to show you. This is a little bit clearer, I feel like, than the main one for the panoramic shot. You are at the viewpoint of, kind of the tourist courtyard, and you still have central London behind you. So you do get to see this image of ancient London on your left to 21st century London on your right. And then a loop around here so you can see the steps down. And so even the wall that separates the courtyard surrounding it has a bit of a height to it. Okay, and then our second one, this is during the art installation of poppies, so the poppy display, and I really like the stark red contrast of color. More to come on this in a minute on what my interpretation of this art installation, and again, you can see the funny panoramic view as it's cutting off the heads of some of the tourists here. But it's really interesting to see the stark red, and you can see an image of it here. So I have a theory that the artist is trying to display all the bloodshed that happened at the Tower of London over the 1,000-year, history. And there's a better shot where you can see the poppies are essentially pouring out of this window to cover the courtyard below. Next, we have the Hall of the Crown Jewels. We just see the outside. So this tour doesn't show us like an in-depth look at the museum, but we do have some pictures we can look at. So this is just the courtyard leading up, and then here's the entrance right here to the Crown Jewels. And we'll take a look at a few of those. Another panoramic view of just the same courtyard. Can have a little bit of a better feel of the height of some of these buildings. So I would say this is probably one of the more popular features of the tower today and why many people do come and visit. We're going to go through a few of these crown jewels now. So this is the crown of Frederick, Prince of Wales, King George I state crown frame. And this is King George IV's coronation crown. And then Mary of Modena's crown and state crown. Queen Alexandra's crown. Now we're getting into some familiar territory for most of us. This is the Queen Victoria's crown. And then the next is her small diamond crown or tiara. And then again, we're back at the entrance of the Crown Jewels Museum. Next, we'll go to the princes of the tower. So 2 princes were actually slain and executed here at the tower. We can see this terrace right here. More than likely, this is where guards would have patrolled, 500, I would say about 500 100 years ago. I don't know if this was actually used after Queen Elizabeth's reign as much for a holding, but it still could have been used up into Queen Victoria. I don't have my dates on that completely accurate. This is the location where the princes of the Tower, Edward V and Richard, were kept and allegedly murdered. And then there were 2 skeletons found buried under the stairs here that are believed to be those of the princes. So we'll have a little look. So this part is called the Bloody Tower. And then just a larger look at the courtyard in front of that. And we'll go to our photos. So here, image of the 2 princes. That was Richard. So here's a little info on it. The tradition of the tower has always pointed out this as the stair under which the bones of Edward V and his brother were found of Charles II during Charles II's time, and they were removed to Westminster Abbey once they were discovered. Westminster Abbey, of course, is the famous cathedral in which all I wouldn't say, well, all British royalty, but some high-ranking British members of society are also buried there. I think Charles Dickens might also be there. Just a few more, and that's what the play about Richard III for Shakespeare was based on. And then here's King Henry VII. Okay, next we're going to go to Tower Green and the scaffolding site. And so this courtyard, at first, I thought this might be akin to what we call the yard, or where prisoners are given outside time, what we like to think of for a modern prison system, and that still could have been true back then. I would say maybe not as likely, as I do believe this was a site for executions. So I'll zoom back around. We have 2 little infographics here that I'm going to share with you. So this is the Tower Green Execution Memorial. And was created by Brian Catling. And then here is the inscription that reads here on the memorial. So it says, "Gentle visitor, pause a while. Where you stand, death cut away the light of many days. Here jeweled names were broken from the vivid thread of life. May they rest in peace while we walk the generations around their strife and courage under these restless skies." And so it's a beautiful memorial. And to give you an idea of, why would we want to memorialize execution? Well, I don't believe parts of history should be whitewashed or covered up just because we find them to be offensive. And it's important to remember that this was a place of popularity during that time, until before television and before all these modern day commodities we have to entertain ourselves with. Public executions were seen as an entertainment event. I think that's evident from Rome and how we like to romanticize gladiators fighting and everything like that. But this definitely would have been a very huge public spot where local Londoners would have came to witness these executions, be they positive or negative. You would have had cheers in the crowd as well as cries. Okay, and now we're on to my favorite part, the Ravens of the Tower. This is known as the Guardians of the Tower of London. Here's their little cage where they're kept. They do get to fly about freely, but I do believe when it's open to the public, they are put back in their cages just to protect them. A little bit about the ravens. So the tower itself is steeped in folklore. And on the website for historical royal palaces, we have a little bit of information that it provides us about the ravens, which I'll read to you now. So our current ravens in reverence's names are Jubilee, Harris, Grip, Rocky, Aaron, Poppy, and Merlinia, female form of Merlin, so I really like that one. Ravens are intelligent birds and each has its own personality. They can mimic sounds, play games, and solve problems. So the legend of this tower It is said that the kingdom and the Tower of London will fall if the six resident ravens ever leave the fortress. And so today they joke that they have seven, so they have one to spare just in case. And Charles II was the first king to have thought that if the ravens ever left, not only would the tower fall, but the crown would as well. And then on this same page, I'll show you, we have a little video of the ravens. So let me share this, and I'm currently sharing that Royal Palace's page, but this is their video. So we have, there are no words, so there are only subtitles, but that was grip. And you kind of get to see them playing about, patrolling the perimeters, looking after their palace, even cutting grass, they say. So it's adorable, but I'm a fan of ravens. They're really smart birds. A funny little quick tidbit about them, they are very intelligent and can remember human faces. And so if a human is to help a raven, they'll often repay the debt by bringing you something shiny or a treat. The treat will be left up to your interpretation, of course. And so the bee feeders, that's a type of London gin, but that's also it's a brand. I know this, but it's a brand of London gin of which the yeomen are on. So I don't know if Beefeater is also another name for the yeomen, but those two guards you saw are the historical guards of the Tower of London. Okay, we're back to our normal virtual tour, and we're actually going to go look at a bit of the darker history of the tower now, which is torture inside the tower. So we're going to see one of the courtyards in which which prisoners would be led to the torture chambers. So around this little corner is the entrance. It actually looks like it's kind of been bricked up, but one of the most known descriptions was from John Gerald, a Jesuit prisoner, who said, "We went to the torture room in a kind of solemn precision. The chamber was underground and dark. It was a vast place, and every device and instrument of human torture was there. They pointed out some of them to me and said I would try them all. Then they took me to a big upright pillar, one of the wooden posts which held the roof of this huge underground chamber." And then we have some images here to try to give you a little bit of a perspective. So first, it's important to mention that no prisoner is known to have ever escaped the Tower of London. Once they were held there, it was normally held until their execution day, or if for some reason they were released. This famous prisoner is Guy Fawkes. Most might recognize the name from the popular American film V for Vendetta, based in London, but I feel like the film gained more mass popularity in our nation rather than in London, for the simple fact of the anarchist group known as Anonymous. They take the mask of Guy Fawkes, and that's what you'll still see them wearing today whenever they address what they believe to be infringements upon civil liberties across the Western world. Guy Fawkes is famous, of course, for attempting to blow up Parliament on November 5th. Not sure for the exact year, but it was during a time in which Parliament was still ran by the nobility, so there wasn't what we call today the House of Commons and the House of Lords. So the common people didn't have a voice in London during his time. London today memorializes November 5th as Guy Fawkes Day, and it's akin to our own Independence Day celebration that we have on 4th of July, where they shoot off fireworks in honor of his memory and sacrifice. Kind of what we're seeing today in our own political climate. You know, revolutions are not always pretty. They're also not always justified, but sometimes they are. So it does take some strength. And then, so Guy Fawkes was tortured for his crimes. Here we see his signature before and after his torture. And next, we'll get into a little bit of the grislier aspects of what criminal justice meant during the early ages of Western civilization. So next up, we have some torture devices. This you may not want to stick around for if you're of the faint of heart. It does not get graphic. They are just illustrations. So there is no actual images of blood or carnage. Some illustrations of how these devices were used. So this is the rack. You may be familiar with it. They have a slight outline of how the prisoner would have been tied up and how that would have been used. If you've ever seen The Princess Bride, which is what this first made me think of, the film, then you are very familiar with the rack. So in here you can see its full length. The plexiglass, of course, is added today, later, for museum goers so they can see the outline of the human body there. And then here's an image of how the rack is used. Next, we have the manacles. So you would be strapped in here where you can see the hands and the hanging loops at the top of what looks like a cross. When I first saw it, it made me think of the crucifixion and crucifixion tactics and techniques used throughout ancient Rome as a form of sentencing for crimes. And then here you have an illustration. So it is a rather, this image does provoke emotional reactions. I think it's supposed to. And as humans, we're often trying to look for a bad guy in most situations here. And the psychology of the picture I'd like to point out, especially to my criminal justice students that might see this, of course, you may consider the prisoner here, number one, to be the bad guy. But from a psychological perspective, you're actually going to think of these hooded figures that are doing the torture to him as the bad guy. And then at the end of the day, England was notorious for kind of sentencing first, proving the crimes later, especially during the Inquisition and other parts of the Dark Ages. So, if anything, the people in control in this scene are the ones sitting at the table. So, I'm not saying these are the bad guys, but this would be the Lord or the magistrate that would be doing the questioning, and this is the person actually in control of the torture and dictating it, not these three individuals that are being forced to act it out. So you do see that divide, that classism divide here when it comes to medieval torture and criminal justice, wherein the lord or lady whose whims are being acted out upon these other lesser, more than likely commoners that are just employed here at the Tower of London. So I think this is a really strong image that can resonate with us again today, and how we can also kind of think of our own justice system and how it reflects this image as well. And then lastly, this is known as the scavenger's daughter, which inevitably will lock a human in place. We have an image of it next. And so you see it, it looks like a huge vice that wraps around the human body and keeps him locked there. Instead of being put in the stocks, it's like his whole body is in a stocks. And like I said, that's kind of it for the grimness of the torture. I would like to state that, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone that wasn't tortured was innocent and vice versa, but we just need to recognize the past and see how much that our modern justice system may still rely on some of these interrogation tactics today. I do know the Tower of London is a staple of the criminal justice system, just for the fact that it was one, a fortress, and it is impenetrable. No one is known to have escaped from the actual tower itself, which we'll look here in the pictures. I believe there's a few more. So here's a bigger one of the poppy installations. So they're not real flowers. It is a pure art installation you can see here. But just to look at a big aerial view of the tower, oh, it's not going to let me zoom in. But here in this main fortress, I believe it's this top tower right here. That on the upper left side, pointing north of the picture, is where the main prisoners would have been held. And this is also, you would think it was just a castle from afar. And when it was constructed, it was partially used for that, but became a fortress and as a way, to protect London. At times of war, that's really why the crown jewels are here, is because it's impossible to break in and get to them. Okay, we have a few more. Here's a shot during World War II. Luckily, it was safe from any bombing. And that's a World War II person. And this is an interesting, so once you get inside the museum, and again, I apologize for not being actually able to find that tour. It isn't free and available for us to use, but here's a little example of how they do show the prison and prisoners of the tower. This is the chair used on the last execution ever conducted at the Tower of London. You can kind of see here where it is cut, essentially probably during the beheading. It doesn't, you can't get close enough to read the detail of how the execution was carried out. And then here's the Queen's house at the back. So if the Queen were to go visit, this is where she would stay. And then this is that lovely picture I was talking about, where hopefully we can get a better view of the poppy installation. And when I saw this, it made me think of a bleeding heart or a gash wound, with the poppies pouring out of this small little terrace right here. And I couldn't find much information on the artist's reasons for this installation, but what I'd like to infer is that it just represents the bloodshed of the Tower of London, possibly, from innocent and guilty people, and then notice that the tower is still bleeding from all of that tragedy, that 1,000 years of tragedy. So I hope you enjoyed today's tour. Like I said, not for the faint of heart, but it does give you a glimpse into a 1,000-year history of criminal justice in Western civilization. Thank you so much.